Coming up on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Fantasy Sports joins us to talk about what is in our respective wallets, who our targets were, and who we're most excited to see in Week 1. All coming up next on the RotoWire Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson here with my good friend, Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Fantasy Sports. Scott and I have known each other for over 20 years. If you listen to anything on RotoWire or anything on Yahoo, you know Scott, you know me. We've been together a long time. Scott, welcome. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. We got the NFL season is finally here. I feel like the exhibition or the summer exhibition, they don't play exhibition football really anymore, but I feel like the summer gets longer and longer. But we're finally here. Just about all of our drafts are in the books, and so we finally get to see what were we right on, what were we wrong on, what 12 guys that nobody wanted are going to be waiver wire darlings in a week or two. So it's a very exciting time of the year.
Yeah, it's great. It's also terrifying. If you have a premium tight end right now, it could be very terrifying. I mean, let's get right off the top here. Travis Kelce hyperextends his knee in practice. All of our carefully laid plans where, hey, I'm going to build around Kelce in the first round. I got him late in the first round. I got a bargain on him. Oh, I don't even know if he's going to play on Thursday night. What are you doing, if anything, right now in reaction to this news?
Well, I feel fortunate that I don't have any Kelce, although, I mean, who's to say how serious this injury may be? A 34-year-old tight end just made me nervous in round one, but I've lost money on not having Kelce the last few seasons. Obviously, he's tied to Andy Reid. He's tied to Patrick Mahomes. Remember he had that Monday night game where he caught 4 short passes, but they were all touchdowns. I know a guy who lost his Monday night game because he was up against Kelce. He's like, okay, as long as Travis Kelce doesn't do something dumb like score 4 touchdowns, Travis Kelce can do that. Kansas City's been a really difficult team for me to try to figure out because last year Mahomes wins the MVP. And really, other than Kelce, no pass catcher went along for the ride. Juju had kind of a toothless 900 yards. And this year it's been like, okay, do I want Tony? Do I want Rice? Do I want Richie James? Do I want Sky Moore? I never really landed on any definitive take. So I'm underweight on most of these guys, knowing that Mahomes can elevate somebody, Andy Reid can elevate somebody. And I'm curious if any of these guys are players you're overweight on. The bottom line with Kelce, though, as far as why I don't have him, is I just don't like my running back and wide receiver rooms if I take a tight end early. I just feel like I'm chasing. My big ethos this year was wide receiver is not as deep as you think it is. You need wide receivers who start with themselves. And if you don't draft those guys early, you can't find – rare exceptions, but you generally in the waiver wire, you can't find a wide receiver who's impactful. You might find a guy who's on your team and he's wide receiver 4 or something, but you're not going to find a star where there'll be running backs none of us thought much of who will end up being decent. The running back you get on waivers, you usually play the next week because he's coming to a bunch of volume. But if Tyreek Hill gets hurt in Miami, it's like, oh, great, there's a Tyreek Hill Jr. ready to go. It doesn't work that way. So my ethos was get really strong wide receivers, maybe do a hero running back build. That meant I don't have a lot of Kelce. And tonight I have one more draft. I'm just going to basically the way I handled Kupp, the way I'll handle Kelce, and this is what I would tell anybody to do if you have a draft coming up is unless you get a really good discount, and unless the room is like giving him to you at a price that you're really excited about, I just let somebody else take the risk. And I realize we're in an era now where a lot of people are like, oh, I drafted my hair on fire. I'm taking Cooper Kupp in the second round. I don't care. I'll take Travis Kelce in the second round. I don't care because I'm trying to be the hero. I'm trying to win my league. If you're trying to win a gigantic contest, I get it. If you're trying to win a managed league, that's never going to be the way I'm going to play.
I'm similar to you. And in fact, I think I have Kelce somewhere. I'm finishing up my spreadsheet, actually, trying to, where do I have this player spreadsheet? Because I have too many leagues and I haven't found where I have Kelce yet. I think I have him in one league on Sleeper. And the problem for me is like Sleeper is on my phone and everything else is on. I should use the website, but the app is actually pretty good. The problem is then I have to go to 2 different physical things to manage my teams. And that's tricky. Like I have a number of leagues on Yahoo. I have a number of leagues on MFL. I have one on ESPN. I have I think a couple on other platforms. It's just like, okay, I have to manage this better. And that's one of the things. How do you, I know you play the same amount of volume as I do, if not more. How do you manage your volume?
I try to keep my games to as few platforms as possible. And when appropriate, I buddy up with people. Frank Schwab and I are co-managers in the Derek Van Riper Pentathlon, in part out of necessity, because unfortunately in Michigan, you still can't play best ball on a lot of platforms, which is incredibly frustrating. And actually set me back this year, because that's my driving range, right? It's where we get all the reps, where we try to figure out what the player pool looks like. And I wasn't able to do that for half of last year and then all of this year. So I felt like I was a little bit behind getting a sense of where the player pool was deep and shallow and all that. But yeah, basically, I guess it's three things. One, try to limit your platforms, although there's so many good platforms. I mean, look, I work for Yahoo and I want you to play there, but I know there's other good places to do. And people are going to different types of contests. This year I joined a Guillotine League for the first time. I'm excited about that with a bunch of Yahoo guys. So that should be a good time. But I try to limit my platforms. I try to buddy up whenever possible. And also, I still do run one league. There was a time when I used to run multiple leagues, and I've kind of cut back from that. And I always make the yearly tweet, right, that every commissioner job turns into adventures in babysitting at some point, with setting the draft, making sure everybody showed up on time and getting all the entry fees. That's just kind of a pain in the neck. It's not the most fun part of fantasy. So try to buddy up, try to limit the platforms, and don't spread yourself too thin with commissioners, because commissioner jobs, that will drive you crazy.
Yeah. And like, I do like to set up like a Google Doc for me, or a Google spreadsheet, just like, at least with my drafted players. Now, maintaining that over the course of the season, when you're running 20 different fab runs, let's be honest, I'm not going to maintain it very well, but at least it's a starting point. When a major guy goes down, okay, where do I have him? Okay, bam, bam, bam. And
great
also,
idea. One other thing I just want to mention really quick, that's really a tenet of life for me. I can't believe 20 years ago when I first met you, Jeff, my way of remembering things was, I'll remember that. I'm playing tennis with Jeff on Thursday afternoon. I'll remember that. Well, we work together. You'd probably remind me, but sometimes I'd forget stuff. I'd forget a doctor's appointment. I'd forget, whatever it was.
And you were 20 years younger then.
For sure. But we all have smartphones now, and it's really easy to set up. Whenever I make a doctor's appointment, whenever I make a golf date, I can play golf on Friday afternoon. I immediately go to my phone, set up a bunch of reminders, and a ping to my phone. I don't assume I'm going to remember anything, because my life is dynamic, like yours is. You're married, you have 2 kids. I know you've been a soccer coach for a long time. You're landing a lot of planes. Obviously all the responsibilities you have at RotoWire, with a website, with a radio, the podcast, and everything. And then you guest on different things. Leagues are drafting at different times. If I didn't keep stuff on a calendar, man, I would forget stuff. And so that ties into my maintenance, where I have reminders for, tout DFS. I have reminders for all of my fab runs, stuff like that, just to make sure I don't forget.
It's really good. And a lot of the sites will do that for you too. That's the other thing. Like, we have in Tout Wars, we have DFS, and that's on DraftKings, and it sends us a reminder. You have an undrafted team. Okay, thank you. I will go do that right now. One of my Survivor contests, same thing. Season Survivor, theseason.com, SZN. I like it's a fun independent site that I like supporting a little bit, because they do a lot of cool things, and a lot of different Survivor contests, multiple sports. That's what I love too. And I know you appreciate something like that, because you do every sport too. I mean, I'm in golf leagues with you. I know you do hoops. I'm in the hockey league that we've been in for 25 years together, that you predated me on, and all that. And I talk about that all the time. But hey, why we do this is what we love. But yes, we need help sometimes, every once in a while. Steering back to KC a little bit here. The other question is, what any other pass catchers or running backs interest you in the KC offense?
I'm curious what Noah Gray's role might be. I mean, I guess he's the Kelce stand-in, the understudy, right? You go to a play, the lead can't make it. There's an understudy ready to go. Can he get 50% of Kelce? Can he get 60% of Kelce? That would be a fancy, viable guy, right? So in deeper leagues, I might be interested in that as a rental. Jeff, I wish I had a great answer for which chief receiver is the one we want. Had you landed on anybody? How have you played that group? Because I don't have anything good on that.
I would say that I have largely avoided the question. I have a little smattering of Tony. I think I have one league where I have Sky Moore. I did pick up Noah Gray in a league yesterday. because it was like a 13th round pick in a slow draft, and like I was that guy. It was 5 picks away from me, and it still got to me. So I was like, okay, who knows? Kelce could play Thursday night for all we know.
True.
Ian Rappaport this morning was saying it's a bone bruise. The suggestion was it was unlikely he'll play this week, but who knows? But why not find out, especially with the late pick there? And I waited on tight end anyways there, so might as well take a chance there. But yeah, it's hard. I actually have a lot of Jerick McKinnon. That's been my answer. I think in a PPR format at least, McKinnon's got a pretty solid floor. He outpointed Pacheco down the stretch last year, even with Pacheco getting more snaps. So I just think that they like the role he's in there. Now, he's not exactly durable, but at the same time, he could be pretty useful.
Right. You wonder if they sat back on him last year thinking that they wanted to have him at the end of the year. Just a weird player who, at an age where we start worrying about running backs and mileage, but he has almost no mileage because he's missed so much time, and then he's been a part-time player at times. I can see the case for McKinnon for sure. And more for me, he's more of this is like the ultimate cop-out. He's more of a best ball player for me than a seasonal guy because I don't want to call the shot. I don't know if I can see the stuff coming with McKinnon, but it's just incredibly frustrating that we have. I don't think anybody doubts that Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the league. I don't think anybody doubts that Andy Reid is at the very top or near the very top of offensive designers. So something good has to happen here, right? Even if Kansas City had a year where everything went wrong, and actually, my friend Matt Smith was making some 8-team divisional winner bets, and if you go to a kiosk in an online in a local casino and try to pick all 8 division winners, you get a huge payout because it's really hard to do. So he put in a couple of them, showed me what the payouts were. I'm like, yeah, whatever. This is more fun than a lottery ticket. I'll just have an NFL lottery ticket. And we were both punching the Chargers to win that division. Just what if this is the year everything goes wrong with the Chiefs, right? Kelce's hurt right now. Chris Jones, that situation's up in the air. Chris Jones actually moved the line, their pass rusher not being available for Thursday. So what if this is finally the year? The Chargers are usually a team where everything goes wrong and they underachieve. And even when they make the playoffs, they find a way to blow a 27-point lead to Jacksonville. But what if this is the year the Chargers with a new offensive coordinator, maybe they take a step forward and maybe the Chiefs finally have a few bumps in the road and things don't go right. Now, the problem is the Chiefs are a team that they can do a lot of things wrong, and then Mahomes can just kind of smooth it all over because he's so good. But on all my divisional lottery tickets, shout out to Matt Smith, I was picking the Chargers.
Yeah, I see the logic in that too. And I think the Chris Jones thing is pretty big. And I think it's really, we spent all our late summer, early training camp with running back angst, but not a whole lot of pass rusher angst. Nick Bosa is still out. Brian Burns sat out practice on Monday. They're trying to reestablish that market too right now. And that's a pretty big deal.
It's crazy. Something that I came around on, this is related to markets. I was out on Darren Waller early in draft season thinking, okay, he's changing teams and he's on the back 9. He's been hurt the last couple of years. And I forget, it might have been Sirius Radio, it might have been a podcast. I don't remember who made this point. Maybe one of the established run guys. They said, maybe the Giants were really smart. They said, look, the tight ends don't get as much money as the wide receivers. Bring in Waller essentially as your de facto number 1 wide receiver, but you're going to pay him tight end money. So you're getting a market that isn't properly allocated with the money. You're basically getting a discount for who's going to be your number 1 receiver. It makes a lot of sense. I tried to draft proactively into Waller for maybe the final quarter of my draft season. I ended up not getting him a bunch of times. So I have other guys I have. Fryermuth is a player I drafted a lot because I'm high in the Pittsburgh passing game. Although I'm really curious to see how that plays out because, I know they had the 5 touchdowns and the 5 possessions. I think Kenny Pickett should take a step forward, but if Kenny Pickett just wasn't that good, I don't think anybody would be surprised by that either. And I realize I'm talking on both sides of my mouth when I say that. But one thing I did change my mind on when you talk about, what positions, the whole running back wage war was going on all summer, but we've been there with tight ends too, right? Jimmy Graham complained about it. You don't franchise me as a tight end. You use me as a wide receiver. I don't think Graham won that argument, but maybe the Giants were ahead of the game by seeing, okay, because everybody's like, and I've said this a million times, what are the Giants doing with that wide receiver room? They're missing like 1 or 2 guys at the top. Maybe they were shrewd to go about it a different way with Darren Waller.
And tackle it with volume otherwise. I mean, they have Hyatt. They have Wan'Dale Robinson coming back. They have Hodgins, who really emerged.
I still like Darius Slayton. I still maintain Darius Slayton is a good football player. Not a great one. Not a wide receiver 1. There's no wide receiver 1 in this roster. But
No,
a lot of teams would like their wide receiver threes. They seem to have a bunch of those.
exactly. And Dable's smart. Kafka's smart. Daniel Jones, the quarterback, is smart. So I like smart people. So,
Sure.
interesting to see what works out with that one there. Mark Andrews, talk about tight end insecurity. Mark Andrews, George Kittle. I mean, both of these guys have big question marks entering week 1 too. Mark Andrews hasn't practiced in 2 weeks. They're talking about him being able to practice on Wednesday, maybe. The phrase, I'm not pushing the panic button yet. Okay, now I'm panicking a little bit when you say that phrase.
Right, for sure. Kittle's a guy I faded because he had a bunch of touchdowns with Purdy last year, but they were long touchdowns, and those typically aren't sticky year over year, especially for a position like tight end, where we just don't think of them scoring from distance. And it's a shame because George Kittle is one of my favorite players. He's another guy that if Kyle Shanahan came into the offensive meeting and said, hey, guys, we're going to run the ball 70 times this week. Kittle, you're blocking all day. He'd be like, great, awesome. He's not somebody who's going to jump up and down and scream about not getting the ball. He'll do whatever you want him to do. One of those great Iowa tight ends. So love him in real life, don't love him in fantasy. I was open-minded to Andrews, even though I mentioned earlier with Kelce, I don't like my running back wide receiver builds typically when I go vanity tight end, but I thought Andrews, there's another wide receiver room. The wide receiver room has a lot more upside than the Giants, but I don't think we really know who's the guy to get there. It's funny how they surrounded Lamar Jackson with 4 number 1 picks in that receiver room if we include Nelson Aguilar in the discussion, which is kind of gratuitous to do that, right? but is this a year where Bateman stays healthy? Can Zay Flowers be an impact player right away? What's left in the Odell Beckham tank? Ultimately, I think Bateman was the chip I landed on, although it turns out I ended up not getting him in a lot of leagues. And then in my hometown auction salary cap draft on Monday night, I let him go to Steve Gleason, my buddy, for $3, which I thought was a steal, where most people were struggling to get receiver depth. We play a lot of players in that league. So Bateman's the guy I'm guessing on in Baltimore. But all along I thought, well, maybe this doesn't even matter. It's just going to be the Mark Andrews 950-yard, 10-touchdown show. And then he's been hurt all summer. And you know my ethos was injuries, right? I try not to draft into injuries. They're going to find you. I want the discount. Ultimately, I thought if we were talking, I don't know, mid-July, I would have thought, yeah, I'll probably be at least at weight or maybe overweight on Mark Andrews. I ended up backing off that as draft season went along.
I got early shares of Mark Andrews, nothing recent. Same sort of thing there. And the thing is, like, you take a vanity tight end also. I mean, there's that wide receiver or running back cost. Or for my case, usually if I'm getting the vanity tight end, I'm usually not getting the quarterback. I'm waiting on quarterback. I'm waiting on one or the other. In an auction, it might be a little bit different. In fact, I do have a Lamar Andrews pairing, which could be pretty sassy, could be tragic. Who knows? Baltimore's had a lot of that sort of injury insecurity. J.K. Dobbins missed much of training camp. Some of that was an injury. Some of that might have been unhappiness with his contract. Bateman missed a lot of time. Now Andrews, there's some question marks. OBJ's coming back from one. I faded OBJ, unfortunately. I'm rooting for him, but I'm not with my wallet. I hope it goes well though, because it's just so rare to come back from 2 ACLs like that.
New offensive coordinator too. So here's another thing I'm looking forward to seeing. Although it may be a little bit frustrating, most teams have pulled back in the preseason. They don't use their starters a lot. And I believe the count was 9 different teams did not use their starting quarterback at all in the preseason, which I think this is an overcorrection, right? It's like, this reminds me in a very general sense of kind of like what happened in baseball, where it's like, okay, we're overusing pitchers. So now everybody's throwing 72 pitches. So let's get the guy out of the game. And I understand there's data, third trip of the order and all that stuff. And baseball is always going to be a great game to analyze statistically because it's just one-on-one matchups for the most part. Football's clouded with context. So it's a much more difficult sport to understand, where baseball, there's so many things that are solvable in baseball because it really comes down to 2 guys most of the time. And even chemistry doesn't matter that much. I mean, the second baseman and shortstop can hate each other. I don't think it really matters for a double play, but I think chemistry may matter in other sports where teamwork is more an integral part of the game. But Jared Goff didn't play in the preseason. I can't imagine. Now, look, these guys obviously practice and they have inter-squad scrimmages. They bring in teams and they have, conditional scrimmages and all that stuff. It's not like they're not doing anything, but I would want to run some reps. I want to see something. And it's funny, some of the teams I wasn't sure about, like the Broncos, like the Browns, right? The Broncos last year want to burn everything I wrote about Russell Wilson. thought Denver was a great pick in week 1. Seattle kicked their ass. And, of course, Geno Smith ended up being really good. And I've accepted that Geno Smith is real. I drafted as if Geno Smith is just a good player. And I have a lot of Lockett and Metcalf in my portfolio. But can Sean Payton fix Russell Wilson? We saw no sign of that in the preseason. It didn't help that just about every Denver receiver of consequence got hurt.
Right.
I guess Cortland Sutton's the only guy who didn't get hurt. Mims was hurt for a little bit. Judy's got an injury. They have 2 guys who are completely out of the picture now in Hamler and poor Tim Patrick for the 2nd year in a row. He can't go. I thought before the summer, well, Deshaun Watson, he can't possibly be as bad as he was last year. And I'll still stand by that. It's for whatever that means. It's not the strongest take in the world. But I wanted to see something encouraging happen with that passing game. I wanted to see Watson look like he was comfortable in the offense. I saw none of that in the preseason. So I know teams can be sitting on stuff. Defenses are vanilla. Maybe the offense isn't calling the real plays yet and all that stuff.
Right.
But,
I don't know. They're knocking off the rust too,
For sure.
My Bengals, I'm worried about that. Joe Burrow hasn't had a normal preseason since his rookie year. And, they started slowly last year. Remember, 5 turnovers against the Steelers last year. They go on the road, face Cleveland, ferocious front line they're going up against there, a divisional rival, one that Burrow struggled against last year too.
I think Cleveland's won 5 or 6 in that series, if I have it right. And I'm a Bengals fan, and other than Nick Chubb, I pretty much hate the Browns, but the Browns were one of my automatic selections this week with I think they're getting 2.5 or 3, depending on the outlet.
Yeah, I have to
I have to pick Cleveland. I have to pick Cleveland in that game.
I do too, actually. That's one in my mind. I knew that line, and I'm going to do that exercise right after we're done with this. But I think you're right about that. Unfortunately, I'm very concerned about this game. We'll see. I'm still starting Burrow where I have him. I'm still starting my guys, but I'm very nervous about that game for sure. Before we move on, talk about what we have in our respective wallets. Got to take care of a couple quick administrative notes. First, we're on the Blue Wire Network. As always, we play a couple of their ads right now. All right. Thank you for your patience on that. Also, got to share a quick note with our sponsor, Rival Fantasy. Rival Fantasy, they've been with us for a little while there, and we're happy to have them on. If you're looking for a place to play head-to-head fantasy football games without the huge tournaments, salary caps, or complicated game types, then Rival Fantasy is where you want to play this NFL season. From a twist on a classic game with Fantasy Bingo, where players generate a lineup to complete achievements and get bingo, to head-to-head fantasy challenges, where you'll pick which of 2 players will score more fantasy points. This is the best of fantasy sports. For the 2023 NFL season, Rival Fantasy is offering new users a $200 deposit match plus a $25 first play voucher. Rival Fantasy is so confident you'll love the experience. They're giving you money to play out of the gate. Experience the future of fantasy sports on Rival Fantasy and become a rival today. I'm Jeff Erickson. My guest is Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Fantasy Sports. You can follow Scott at Scott_Pianowski on Twitter. And, of course, read him on Yahoo, listen to him on Yahoo, you name it. Scott's everywhere. And we always talk about it. So I love having him on. Let's talk about some of your most rostered players. What did you do at quarterback, Scott? How often did you get a top 3 or a top 8 fantasy quarterback this year?
I don't think I have any of the Trinity.
Okay.
I may have an Allen share here or there, but my goal generally is to try to purchase or draft a B+ quarterback who can be an A. So I thought going into draft season, I'd have a lot of Burrow. I'd have a lot of Trevor Lawrence. And what ended up happening is I got so obsessed with the wide receivers. It's interesting because this year with the running backs, I actually thought if you got one you liked, I thought you could really wait and do well at running back. And I have a lot of kind of boring. That's RB2, RB3 tier gets a little bit muddled with so many choices. And I never felt stressed at running back, but because I wanted to pound the wide receiver room, I ended up downshifting to maybe that 3rd tier of quarterback or Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, guys like that, Geno Smith. Those are probably. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I got to figure those are the 3 quarterbacks I rostered the most.
Do you have a favorite among those 3?
I think it's Daniel Jones just for that running back board.
Sure.
I feel like Geno's the safest. Here's the thing with Cousins that's I think people miss, even though I did draft him a lot. Justin Jefferson's a god. He won Offensive Player of the Year last year and was the consensus 101 pick. Didn't go first everywhere, but went first more than anybody else. And Cousins had very ordinary efficiency. His efficiency actually took a step back, despite the fact that Jefferson was uncoverable, and then they added Hawkinson in the middle of the season, and they sure peppered him with targets. They didn't do a lot with them. I think he only averaged like 9 yards a catch or something like that. He only caught 3 touchdowns, but he did have 8.5 targets a game, which is a huge number for a tight end. Or if you even get to 100 targets, you're really busy. But so I think Cousins is definitely in the decline phase. It's just a lot of it is masked by Jefferson being so good. But they have 11 dome games this year. They have a defense that's taken a step back. I just think there's going to be a lot of shootouts with Minnesota. Cousins is a very safe pick. And how much can he fall if Jefferson's going to be this good? With Geno, DK Metcalf is fantastic. Lockett, the last 5 years, wide receiver 11 to 15. He's always draftable after that. You don't even draft Lockett at his floor. You draft him below his floor. He's an easy guy to make a profit on. I don't think Geno's going to pumpkin. He actually played, I know it was a short sample, but small sample, but he played better than Russell Wilson the previous year. I wish I had seen that as signal. I thought, well, whatever, I don't care about 4 or 5 games. So I wrote that off, and I guess I should have paid attention to it. And with Jones, I mentioned maybe Jones is my favorite of the group because I believe in Dable. If Waller provides a boost, if they get any receiver to take even like a half step forward, I don't need anybody to break out, just somebody to be a reliable first target. Jones is going to run for probably 650 yards or something like that, a handful of touchdowns. I think Dable proved himself as the real deal last year, getting that Giants team into the playoffs. So Jones is maybe the preference there. I think Geno's probably the safest guy, maybe the best setup for Cousins because he's got the dome, he's got the bad defense, and he's got Jefferson. But all 3 of those guys were players I was comfortable rostering.
I like that range too. And I have a lot of Geno. I share your belief in Geno. And I had like James Coe on from Reception Perception, and they added quarterback analysis this year, and they're big on Geno. So that was another one of those I like seeing people that really studied that position really closely. Smart people, when they kind of agree with my conclusions, hey, I'm gonna cite that for sure.
For sure.
The ones that are the ones that are flying in my face. But let's face it, it's not hard to find an opinion on any single player in our fantasy universe here. I have the good problem of too many follows on Twitter, so I get competing information sometimes.
And my favorite thing in my diet in September is confirmation bias, baby.
Yes, it is. Yes,
smart guy like James Coe agrees with me. Yeah, it's fine. Sign me up.
Yeah, exactly right. I only have I have Hurts in a couple of leagues, including the best ball that we're doing that you don't get to see, and the pentathlon. I did the Eagles thing there. I did an Eagles stack there, so it was kind of fun. I was drafting from the wheels, why not try something fun? So did the AJ Brown, Hurts, Goddard thing on that one there. But I don't have any Allen, don't have any Mahomes. Sure, and of course I regret not having Mahomes. I regret also not having the 2022 price on Mahomes.
Right. Yeah, last year that was the cheapest you ever could have gotten the Mahomes Kelce stack, and a lot of people rode that. I think Kelce was the most impactful player on Yahoo, where if you had him, you were most likely to be one of the top 500 teams, which is just one way to measure how impactful a player is, what his win rate is probably some data that's a little bit more sophisticated. But so I wonder, what will it be this year? We look back and say, maybe we'll be like, oh, all the teams that drafted Kenny Pickett and Deontay Johnson will gloriously run to championships. I don't know. But by the way, I don't have as much Pickett as I thought, even though I have a lot of prongs of that passing game.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Pickett looked good at the final quarter of last year. And their touchdown pass rate is just not – it was so low last year. That has to – if that gets even to league average – and with the receivers they have, everybody likes Deontay Johnson. Everybody likes George Pickens. I think everybody likes Freiermuth. They have 2 interesting running backs, and I'd be curious to see if Jalen Warren has a standalone role right away. Does he really have any chance to maybe get a 50-50 timeshare with Harris or be the primary back? Some people would say yes. Some people would say no. Even the beat writers seem split on that. But that's a team we talk about what are we looking for? What are the reveals we want to see? And I mentioned earlier, Pittsburgh, they played their starters 5 possessions in the preseason. They were all touchdowns. Again, it's a lot of times it's against backups, so not always, but sometimes. Pickens is just one of those guys. There's no pass that Pickens couldn't catch. And a lot of people who I respect, I think Matt Harmon, you mentioned Reception Perception, my colleague at Yahoo is one of them. He's a huge Deontay guy. Freiermuth was touchdown guy his first year. Didn't score touchdowns last year, but Freiermuth is tight end. Those guys are always open because they're just so much bigger than everybody else. In fact, I actually think for all the talk that's been made about the AFC East, because Aaron Rodgers came over and Miami's got a lot of fun players, and wow, they must be a good division if the Patriots are the worst team. I think the AFC Central might actually be the most interesting division in football right now.
Well, I agree. I think it's just
AFC North. AFC Central. AFC North.
Yeah. I knew it. Yeah. Hey, it used to be the AFC Central, so it's all good. I knew exactly where you're going with that.
The Houston Oilers, Jeff. Look out for the Oilers this year, right?
Yeah, Jerry Glanville's got them playing good. Kenny Pickett's. If you want to look at you want to act on that a little bit, the touchdown prop on BetMGM is 18.5, and you get
if he's not hurt, he beats that easily.
FanDuel, it's 17.5, but at minus 134 on the over, at least on the juice.
That's not even that bad. That juice isn't even that bad. I'm going to look into one of those as soon as we get done.
Yeah, I made it. I did Kev Masarajan's podcast, and we were doing bold calls, and I think Pickett was one of the guys. I think he could get 25 passing touchdowns. You want to tease that up a little bit, you could probably even get great odds on that if your favorite venue allows for that sort of thing. But I think that I'm in lockstep with you. Pickett, I think Pickett's one of those. I think Brock Purdy's another one. If we're drafting all of their parts, all their receiving parts, all their skill position players, why aren't we drafting the quarterbacks more often? I feel Sam Howell's also the same way a little bit there too. I like the Washington skill position players too.
Yeah, Jahan Dotson is one of my most rostered players, and my angle before McLaurin got hurt is I thought Dotson. I love Terry McLaurin, I always have, but I thought Dotson had a chance to be their best receiver with a healthy McLaurin, and now Terry McLaurin's got turf toe. Unfortunately, that blew out. Dotson's ADP just got to a kind of a silly place over the last couple of weeks, which is why we like to draft early and medium in the summer, so you can maybe get early some stories. Dotson's a very trendy player, and there's a bus filled with fantasy analysts who are all in on Jahan Dotson. I'd like to think I'm somewhere seated in the front of that bus, but I because I was drafting him in July and stuff. But whatever, I'm not saying I was first or anything. It doesn't even matter. I just know this. If Jahan Dotson is a breakout player this year, it's really going to benefit me because on a bunch of my rosters. And I don't know how good Sam Howell is, but all I'm asking him to be is better than what they've had the last couple of seasons. I don't think that's too big of an ask.
I agree. Howell is like a target in super flex leagues for me as my second QB or sometimes even third. And it's just kind of that wild card guy. Before we move on to your most commonly rostered running backs, let's take care of another quick business note. I think we can all agree that fantasy sports are awesome. So is daily fantasy and sports betting. That's why I have so many free accounts. What's not awesome is going to a bunch of different apps to find the best odds and manage all of your fantasy lineups. Enter Bettor Vision. That's Bettor Vision. Bettor Vision is the only app that syncs all your fantasy, DFS, and sportsbook accounts in one place. We only show you the best odds for every bet, so you'll always get the best value. And our dashboard is the only one-stop shop to track all of your fantasy matchups, DFS picks, and bets. Visit bettorvision.us to download Bettor Vision today. We're just talking about managing all of our leagues and all that. Perhaps an idea there to check that out. So thank you, Bettor Vision, for jumping in. That's bettorvision.us if you want to get a quick check out there. All right, let's talk running backs. Who have you found yourself rostering most frequently in the early range? And then because I know you're trying to do anchor or hero running back. So who is your anchor that you're getting more often than not?
I wanted to be Nick Chubb, and it didn't fall that way, which really makes me sad. My most common, I don't know, vanity back. It feels weird to even call him this. Is your guy Joe Mixon. Just thinking he's going to fall in the end zone 8 to 12 times by accident. I like the offense. They'll sprinkle in their backups, but there's nobody who's ever going to take the job away from Joe Mixon. And
I agree.
Also, I think teams a lot of times like, oh, yeah, we like our running back 2, we like our running back 3, and then the bullets are flying. It's like, okay, Joe Mixon's going to play 90% of the snaps because we need to win this game against Baltimore or something like that. So, I wanted it to be Chubb so badly, and I kept getting in rooms where I either had a slot that didn't make sense for Chubb, or I was in a room where somebody liked Chubb. A lot of times I got, okay, it's this guy or Chubb, and I'm going to get Chubb, and the other manager took Chubb. So that really frustrated me. So I think I need some Nick Chubb props to smooth that over.
I have on that.
I have a lot of, on the cheaper side, I have a lot of the play for September running back. Jamal Williams, 3-game suspension for Alvin Kamara. Samaje Perine, if Javonte Williams comes off slow. Raheem Mostert, the season kind of parted for him. They didn't get a Taylor trade done. God love the Colts. Yeah, Jalen Waddle and a pick, and we'll trade you Taylor, sure. And then you have to pay Taylor, too. That's never getting done. But
yeah, exactly.
I don't think anybody thinks Mostert will be healthy all season. Perine, as you know, is more of a jag than a special talent. But Williams, he does get Tennessee this week, which is not an easy draw, but I got to figure they brought him in to score 10 touchdowns, and Kamara was a guy I was fading all year. So another player I warmed up to, a shout out to Frank Schwab, who was kind of steered me to him, is Brian Robinson. Didn't have a huge take on him, but I noticed he caught 5 passes, short passes, didn't really go anywhere. I think they went for 15 yards in the preseason. You think, well, why do I care about that? I think he had 9 catches all last season. New coordinator, Eric Bieniemy. I've kind of accepted that I don't think Antonio Gibson is anything special. We thought he was something coming out of Memphis that maybe he isn't. All I'm asking for Robinson is to maybe get 30, 35 catches, 40 catches. That would be great. In addition to the first down roll, the second down roll, the goal line roll, because it's hard to maybe trust some of these guys who aren't going to catch the ball at all. As long as they're willing to give him at least 25 or 30 catches, what I think right now is in the bank. Maybe he's got the upside for 40. We talked about the Washington offense maybe being ascending. It'll be interesting to see what Bieniemy does with that group. Brian Robinson, nobody's going to fight you on Brian Robinson. And again, I talked about this tier having so many different reasonable options that I felt like you could draft a lot of different guys. You mentioned earlier drafted McKinnon, who might even be cheaper than some of these guys. The 2 backs in Seattle, Walker's price went down all summer, and Charbonnet is there, who's interesting. David Montgomery's a guy I rostered a lot, who you would think is going to have the Jamal Williams. Maybe this is too convenient, Jeff. Tell me if it is. But I mean, Gibbs and Williams, doesn't that look a lot? Gibbs and Montgomery, doesn't that look a lot like last year with Swift and Williams, right? I mean, you got the speedy, shorter guy, the quick twitch guy who's maybe you're between the 20s player. Maybe you don't want to score the touchdowns with him. It's a good offensive line. They kept the offensive coordinator. I feel like David Montgomery, I know it's been years where he hasn't had the greatest short yardage efficiency, but that line is so good. David Montgomery, if healthy, why won't he score 10 touchdowns?
I can see that very easily. And there was that cryptic remark by the offensive coordinator. We're going to use Gibbs in ways that people don't expect. Yeah, goal line back? No, I don't think that's it. It's probably going to be as a receiver, I think, a little bit more often. Maybe they'll use him at the goal line. Maybe
a lot of times the running back as a receiver talk is kind of silly. It ends up not happening. But look at their wide receiver room, right? I mean, Sun God, St. Brown, who I love, one of my most rostered receivers, he's great as a slot guy. They had high hopes for Jameson Williams, and not only is he suspended for 6 games, but they wanted to use him in the preseason a lot because he played so little last year. They thought he needed the reps, and then he got hurt. Yeah. So, look, I know this is the easiest thing in the world to fade Jameson Williams, but it's like the people who draft him, you don't get him for 6 weeks. And then week 7, you're going to need a prove-it week, and maybe he's limited on snaps. Then you'll need another prove-it week, and then their bye comes up. Jameson Williams might help you in November. I'm never going to, and we don't even know yet what he is, right? And he's played so little in the NFL. Again, his preseason was washed out. One of my biggest ethoses for fantasy, I talked about don't draft into injuries, they'll find you. It's also play fantasy with a microscope, not a telescope. This idea of, look at my team in week 17. I'm going to dominate. I've analyzed all the matchups and everything. Some of those matchups you think are great are lousy. And some of those matchups you think are lousy are going to actually be favorable. And we just don't know it yet because the NFL is a snow globe league with suspensions, with injuries, with new schemes that take a while to gel, or a scheme that falls apart, or a team that quits. 2 years ago, the last team to lose a game was Arizona, 2 years ago. Since then, they fired their coach. Their quarterback isn't going to play opening day, and they look like they're not even trying right now. In under 2 years, they've totally – just everything's falling apart. And that's the NFL. That's the model this game is built on, that things can change so radically, so quickly. I mean, the Bengals were just lousy for such a long time. And then, they got good again. And then they got bad again. And then they go to the Super Bowl again. I mean, that's where the NFL is. And right now there's a team. It happens every year. A team that came in last the previous year wins their division. And a bunch of playoff teams don't make it again. And I know I used to always give Chris Liss, your buddy, a little bit of ribbing when he'd talk about some of the teams that wouldn't make the playoffs as a bold prediction. I'm like, that's not a bold prediction. That's the NFL's blueprint. That's just the way the league works. Right.
Yeah. And it's always and I think he would say out of these 10, projected drag teams, 2 will make the playoffs, and it's true. It's almost always universally true. And who's this year's Rams? Great team that just completely splinters after
another team. It's hard to believe they won a Super Bowl 2 years ago. They have lookout below potential. I wouldn't draft Cooper Kupp at all right now.
Agreed.
Stafford, this could be his last year. The offensive line has some issues. I will say I do like the way Cam Akers finished last year. I don't see Kieran Williams as a major threat to him, so Akers will get a lot of volume and even more boring volume. Tyler Higbee's a catch and fall guy, but he's going to catch 80 passes and fall. It may be 80 for 650 and 5, but he's going to catch 80 passes because he has to.
And for where you're getting him, you'll take that every day and twice on Sunday for sure. Absolutely. Don't love that Stafford having a hard time connecting with the young receivers comment there. So I was like, you're paid millions and millions of dollars. Go share a Spotify playlist with them or something.
Right.
Figure it out.
Remember, right? It was him and Cup went to breakfast every morning, right? I mean, what?
Yeah.
Van Jefferson doesn't like breakfast, I mean, you can't have lunch with these guys. What's going on here?
Exactly there. It's so funny there. They just do a TikTok. It's okay. But stop doing pizza commercials. Excuse me. So yeah, I couple other. I was gonna have one other running back comment, but you know what? It'll survive without it. We're gonna move on. We got one other commercial note to take care of, and we're gonna move on to Scott's wide receivers. We're gonna talk some Garrett Wilson in a second here, but first, football is back. Kick off the NFL season with vivid seats and score tickets to all the hottest matchups and biggest games of the year. Catch every pass, every tackle, and every heart-pounding play of your favorite team live and in person. And with Vivid Seats rewards, now you earn rewards with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets and simply cash in your credit toward your 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Plus, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 per ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's code ROTOWIRE. From the 50-yard line to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2023 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. I have the app. I've used it many times, especially when I'm traveling. It's really ideal to go ahead and get tickets that way. I did that when I was doing my college tour with Allie last year. Went to a Padres game. It worked out great. So I personally recommend that.
Did you use Vivid Seats for the Messi game in LA?
No, that one I would need some good Bitcoin to afford, and I was out of town. But
right, yeah, I saw all the celebrities were at that game. Right, that was a really big ticket. It's just cool. I know this is not a soccer podcast, but it's just cool. I realize that American soccer is obviously we're not on the level as European soccer, but it's just cool for Messi to come over and be great and just energize the league in a way that I think is very exciting.
Yeah, sometimes Beckham worked out pretty well when he came over. Messi's obviously doing well. Some others don't. Steven Gerrard with the Galaxy. Oh, so bad.
I'm old enough to remember the Cosmos, right? Where I didn't. Maybe not old enough to remember Pele, but I mean, they brought over Beckenbauer. They brought over Carlos Alberto. Yep. Giorgio Canaglia wasn't a big name when he came over necessarily, but he was a star in the NASL, although nobody could stand him because he was so arrogant. But that the documentary in the Cosmos was really good. And then the NASL got Johan Cruyff, who had retired and lost a lot of his money in bad investments. He said, well, I guess I need to keep playing. So he went and played in LA for a year, won the MVP. I think the moment he landed in America, he'd already won the MVP because people just idolize Cruyff. He's one of the 5 best soccer players probably of all time. But
exactly,
he came over and was great. Watch that. I guess the takeaway here is watch the Cosmos documentary if you haven't seen it. The book itself is really good. There's also a book called Rock and Roll Soccer. Rodney Marsh is on the cover, who's a fascinating guy, who's still one of my favorite soccer pundits. I grew up watching. I remember I played hockey, right? I didn't play soccer at all at first. Yeah. And I played hockey, played baseball. I played everything pretty much, golf, all that, tennis. And baseball season would end early because people would go on vacation. And they said, well, do you want to join the soccer league? All right, what's soccer? And they showed me the goal, the size of the goal. I'm like, wait a minute, I came from hockey, right? I'm like, what is every game 15-14? Why wouldn't you score every single time? I didn't realize it was actually kind of hard to get in the scoring position. Even with that, I scored a truckload of goals because I don't know, whatever. People couldn't play defense, I guess. But they used to have a show called This Week in the NASL, and I would just see the goals. I didn't realize, again, it was kind of hard to score. They would show the best goals of the previous week. I'd be like, these things are beautiful. They're awesome. They're just fell in love with it. I still wish the game were a little bit more open. I would actually reform the offside rules just a little bit, but still, soccer is. I know you, as not just a soccer fan, but as one of the most successful, dominant coaches of youth soccer in California history. You just retired recently from that, if I understand correctly.
Yes, I did.
We're both big soccer guys. I know your girls came up playing soccer, so it's a wonderful sport.
It is. It's amazing. And I was a terrible player as a kid. I played 2 years. I'm left-footed. I play left back and more often left out.
I'm surprised because you're such a great softball player. I could barely get a point off you in tennis.
Dude.
So
I am slow, first of all.
I didn't know in tennis because you're always lacing the ball in the corner and making me run around.
Yeah, well, I'm mobile enough, I guess, but there's less ground to cover in tennis. Whereas soccer, you get exposed pretty fast, especially on long runs. It's all right though. I still play on Sunday nights. We have the adult league, and hey, I get exposed there too, but I have a lot of fun. It's one of those. Usually back. Sometimes I play outside mid, but running the channels after a while, I get pretty tired pretty quick. So it's all good though. But it's a no slide tackles allowed. It's a co-ed league. We all have to go to work on Monday morning, sort of type of league.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's great. It's so healthy, except for the beers in the parking lot afterward part. But that's healthy emotionally. So there you go. You got that too.
Well, Kanali was drinking Chivas Regal and all that stuff. So you're following in good footsteps.
Exactly. That's the way I view it too. All right, let's talk wide receivers. Let's talk a little Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson. I know you're all over him. Where you couldn't get him, you wanted him. Everybody's all over him. Let's talk about him.
I know. I'm not giving you anything you haven't heard already, right? But man, I talk about what I want to see in the preseason. I want to see Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers play a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What'd they do? Oh, bubble screen to Garrett Wilson. Oh, back shoulder, uncoverable throw where the coverage was actually good for a touchdown to Garrett Wilson. Doesn't even hurt that he's wearing the number 17, which is obviously the number Devontae Adams wore. And look at the other receivers there, right? I mean, Lazard. They have a bunch of journeyman guys, and Garrett Wilson, who was great last year despite horrible quarterback play. I mean, last year it was like, oh, great. Joe Flacco's playing this week. Oh, great. Mike White's playing this week. We're spared Zach Wilson. Garrett Wilson had a great season, only the 4 touchdowns, but he looked the part of a dominant player or potentially dominant player despite bad infrastructure around him. And this, people say, well, who's Aaron Rodgers now? Right? And I look at it as this reminds me so much of Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay had a better setup because Evans and Godwin, they imported Gronkowski. The Jets don't have quite that much talent at the receiver room and the pass catchers. But Brady realized when he left New England, they can't support me anymore. I need to go somewhere else. I need to have the cushy setup. I'm driving this old beater car. I need to have a nice, shiny new SUV. And I think Rodgers realized that too. Wilson's getting targeted off the bus. He's going to get 155, 160 targets. I think what's in range of possibility, top 3, top 4 wide receiver. He could be the guy in the cover of all the magazines next year. He might catch 100 balls for 1,400 yards and 12 or 13 touchdowns. I think what Justin Jefferson did last year, I think Garrett Wilson has a chance at that. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Right.
Bottom line, look, if you haven't drafted, you can say, well, this is great. You love Garrett Wilson. So does everybody else. So what do I do with that? You have my advice to take Garrett Wilson as early as you want. Generally, I take what rooms give me, and I'm kind of a value hound, and I'm not one of these, I have to get my guy no matter what. I broke the rules for Garrett Wilson.
Kind of wish I have some Wilson. I wish I had a little bit more. I took Lamb over Wilson just last weekend, and I have some second thoughts on that.
You'll regret that.
I think so too.
Lamb's a terrific player, by the way, obviously.
Yeah. But I like a lot of those receivers in that range. That's the thing. So does everybody, obviously. So does everybody loves Chris Olave too. Guess what? You're not going to get him unless you're taking middle of the second round now. Everybody loves Calvin Ridley. Same sort of thing.
In the pentathlon, we have we started off with Wilson and Olave, and then backed it up with Lockett and Dotson. And I was actually going back and forth with some of my good friend Joe Nazaro, who's one of the engineers, because I think the Yahoo software said. It's maybe tied to the RotoWire projections, by the way. I don't think you've projected Garrett Wilson for enough touchdowns. I think it said our wide receiver room was a weakness. And I'm like, wait a minute. I have Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Tyler Lockett, and Jahan Dotson. That's strength in my mind. So I went and did a bunch of – I added up all the ADPs for the last 5 days in NFFC, and I looked at a couple of different projection sites, and both of them said that we had a top 4 receiver room. So I can sleep at night. Even if, again, I'm not generally somebody who – has to have my guy. I'll wrestle. I'll just pay whatever it costs. In the case of the pentathlon salary cap draft, I was surprised. I was prepared to pay $5 more for Wilson. I didn't have to pay it for whatever reason, so I felt pretty comfortable with that. Olave is another guy I like. Now, here's the thing. I talked about Kirk Cousins last year being sneaky, efficiency dipping. Derek Carr's efficiency stats last year, despite having Devontae Adams, were worse than Andy Dalton's. I don't think people realize that.
Yeah,
So
he was awful.
Derek Carr needs to show us that he can still play. But Chris Olave is just one of those guys who can't be covered. And I
Derek
think
Carr's worst game last year was at New Orleans. People forget about that. They got shut out. They barely crossed the 50 in that game. And yet they turned around and signed him to a big deal. It was one of the biggest disconnects I've ever seen. I thought it
Derek
was
Carr
pretty
is
funny.
the answer. By the way, I mentioned just in passing Devontae Adams, who I drafted very little, possibly not at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point where Garrett Wilson over Devontae Adams was a hot take 4 or 6 weeks ago. It just became a take at the end of draft season. Jeff, are we going to look back and say, what are we doing here? Keep it simple, stupid. When Devontae Adams just 1,350 yards, 13 touchdowns, that's like his starting point. Did we miss the boat on him, or is it right to be worried about McDaniels, right to be worried about Jimmy Garoppolo? I know Aiden O'Connell played pretty well in the preseason, but who knows? He's a 4th-round pick. What was your stance or your approach to Devontae Adams this year? Because I felt like his price get a little bit cheaper and a little bit cheaper as the summer went along.
I was in lockstep. I actually had Adams below to begin with. So yeah, I don't have any Adams, I don't think, and I'm okay with that. It's the Jimmy G factor, or maybe even the Jimmy G, being hurt factor is pretty big for me. I just, I'm looking up to see exactly where I have Adams, but it's behind all of those wide receivers that go in that range. I think I had him, I think Cup, changed things a little bit, but I had seen Brown over him. I had Wilson over him. I had Lamb over him. I have Adams at 16 overall, one notch ahead of Olave, behind Pollard, behind Bijan, behind Barkley. That wasn't getting Adams more often than not.
Right. And here's the other thing, and I always say it's no fun to play fantasy football like an actuary, but while running backs at age 28, 29, 30 season, we get nervous. Receivers, early 30s is when, first of all, when receiver hits 30, the idea that he's going to have his best season he's ever had is out the window. That almost never happens. And I always want, if I can, to draft a guy who hasn't had his best season yet. Now, maybe it's unfair with Adams because, 18 touchdown seasons just don't repeat. Even last year, he led the league in touchdown catches. But age 31 season, I'd rather be a year early than a year late. Not that Devontae Adams can be a bad football player, but maybe that 1,500 turns into 1,250. Maybe that 14 touchdowns turns into 9 touchdowns. I want guys who are on the up escalator, not the down escalator.
Similarly, I have no DeAndre Hopkins whatsoever.
I thought he was an easy fade, actually.
Yeah,
I never considered drafting him. He basically wasn't on my board.
Yeah, I have him at 59, which never gets him. I hate the Tennessee aspect of it there. That I thought that hurts. Yes, he's the only game in town, but what game doesn't matter? Especially
I actually don't mind Treylon Burks and Chico Okonkwo. I hope with Okonkwo, they can just say, look, don't tell me what he can't do. I don't care if he can block. I don't care what his body type is. The guy gets downfield and runs by people. And by the way, you have a receiver room that needs guys like that. He obviously looks like a receiver. He can look like a tight end. Play him at receiver, right?
Yeah.
The Portland Trailblazers, we need a center. Play Jordan at center, right? Play Okonkwo at receiver. Who cares if he can block? I don't care. I know their offensive line is bad. Here's another hot take. Go by buddy Matt Smith, the 18 parlay division winners. On almost all of them, I picked the Titans to win that division. Not that if it was like gun to head or I'll pay your mortgage for a year, I picked the Jaguars like everybody else. But Jacksonville's a perfect team. I don't think anybody thinks Houston or the Colts have a chance to win that division, at least a strong chance. They still have Vrabel. And their collapse last year coincided with Tannehill being hurt. Most teams are screwed if their backup quarterback gets hurt. The offensive line looks bad right now, but that's like a classic coach-up position. A lot of times teams have lines that look bad. And then we hit the middle of October. It's like, remember that offensive line was terrible? It's not that terrible anymore. Also, a veteran quarterback can mask a lot of that pass protection problems by calling the right play, fixing the assignments and all that stuff. Tennessee's going to be okay. They're not going to be great. This is a division where 9 wins might win it anyway. Because I think Jacksonville's just an okay team. I don't buy that they're this juggernaut. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence skews a lot of that. And if Ridley is the player, I don't know what you did with Ridley. When people start drafting him like he has to be good right away, I got nervous about that, and I didn't do it, but I get it. He was wide receiver 4 in 2020. He's only, age 29? He turns 29, I think, in December. But I think Tennessee can steal that division.
I paid for him in the pentathlon. I did not pay him in a lot of snake drafts at that going rate. I got him a lot of times early, though. Early in draft season, I got him. I'm old enough to remember when he went in the 4th and 5th round. And Chris Olave went in the 3rd. Now, those were good things. Good days.
Your pentathlon receiver room was what was the ethos I was talking about. You got Chase, exactly. Ridley, and Debo. So their wide receiver, their ADP in NFFC the last 5 days is 2 for Chase, 14 for wide receivers, 2 for Chase, 14 for Ridley, 18 for Samuel. So with the possible exception of Genstad, who's got Lamb, St. Brown, and Keenan Allen, or maybe even the Kiefer team that has Tyreek Hill, Higgins, and Metcalf. I mean, you guys, as much as I love my Wilson Olave Lockett room, you guys have the 3 best receiver rooms in the league, and that was I was trying to build something like that.
Yeah, I think we're all and honestly, a lot of my auction strategy is similar to yours, especially in the pentathlon when we have so many starting roster spots. Chase was the one guy I spent, but notice he was 42. He wasn't 50. He wasn't 48. He was definitely a notch below Jefferson and others. And
I'm underweight on Chase. It's killing me. He's so uncoverable.
He's so amazing, so awesome. I love being a Bengals fan right now. It's so much fun. Higgins is awesome.
You won't love it someday, but yeah, you'll. Love
it. Fine. Yeah. Hey, win by 1. I'll take that.
Win by 1. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, I'll take that one there. But and just the whole general ethos though of, hey, I'm not going to go stars and scrubs unless it's like a 10-team league and we have a basic number of roster spots. Super flex, 2 tight end, extra flex. It's just like, yes, I am going to spread the risk here.
I love deep roster spots where depth matters, where it's not I'm just gonna get 4 stars, and then I don't care if like 6 of my guys are getting cut because the waiver wire is rich. I love the way Derek sets up that league. The pentathlon is obviously a blast, and the leagues I run, my hometown league, the 01824 league that had our salary cap draft on Monday, it's super flex. We have a bunch of jumbo flex spots, and we only have 4 or 5 bench spots. So and limited IR, which. Limited IR or no IR is the way I think all leagues should be. This idea that you should have unlimited storage space but nobody to pick up is not the way I like to roll. But I love, why not start more guys? And people say, well, there's not enough good players. It doesn't matter. It just means that your final starting guy is, maybe he's a 750-yard receiver. Maybe he's and
that's a good player, by the way.
That's okay. Yeah, it's still a good player, right? It's another guy to root for. It's another game you're interested in. And what's wrong with that?
Make Tyler Boyd matter. That's what I want to say.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, I used to call those Mohamed Sanu leagues back when Mohamed Sanu was like the 835-yard 6 touchdown guy. That guy should have fantasy value. And the thing was super flex, right? No more of this. Oh, I need a quarterback. I'll just go to the waiver wire and pick up Daniel Jones or Geno Smith or whoever. I mean, maybe this year it's Sam Howell or somebody. Those guys.
Justin Fields last year was on the waiver wire in a lot of
those guys should be rostered too. They should draft it too.
Yep. I didn't get the chance to do the super fan Ted Bell league, but he does. He also structured the league similarly too, and I love that.
Love that structure. There was the Stopa league, there was the Evans league, was the Ted Bell league, and I'm not a look at me guy, but I will say with much pride that I've been in all of those leagues. I've made the playoffs every year.
Nice. Yeah, it works. Have a deep roster, and it works for sure. Scott, awesome stuff. Thank you for spending an hour with me today. It's always fun talking with you, and it's always fun talking shop with you. So thanks for coming on board. Good luck in your leagues. Good luck in your golf game. And let's have a fun NFL season.
Thanks for having me. Of course, everything's open for business over at Yahoo. If you still want to get another league or get in a pick'em league, Survivor League, whatever it is. And much love to the RotoWire people, Jeff and Peter Schenke and Chris Liss, who used to be with you guys, Tim Schuler, Jason Thorpe, you guys have always been, Doria, you guys have always been great to me. There's so many smart people over there. It's amazing. The resources, you play DFS, it's a great optimizer. It's I don't know how anybody plays fantasy and doesn't subscribe to, of course, you listen to this podcast, I'm sure you do subscribe to RotoWire, but they offer so many resources. They save you time. They give you good intel. I'm just proud to have my toe in the water over there, as this kind of like a side guy, but doing stat picks again, which is fun. And just RotoWire, basically meeting you guys changed my life and helped me get a career out of this, and I'll always be very grateful for that.
Indeed. And hey, it's been a hell of a ride. You guys thanks for the endorsement, and you guys can check it out for a free trial if you want to. RotoWire.com/pod. You can see it right there if you're streaming with us right now. RotoWire.com gets you no credit card required, gets you a free peek behind the paywall. Hopefully you want to subscribe. That's going to wrap up today's podcast. Make sure to tune in to John and Mario tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Good day.